All right, we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. Week 5 is here. We're going to go over Thursday Night Football, of course. Some interesting running back situations, in tonight's game. We're also going to go over our Week 5 quarterback rankings, our Week 5 running back rankings. And we got some interesting rankings
Yeah,
this week.
to say the least.
Yeah. Zach, I don't think Zach's a big fan of my rankings this week, but we're going to talk about it. But yeah, let's talk about the Thursday night game real quick. Let's get right into it. Jonathan Taylor is going to be out tonight, right? And Nahim Heinz and Phillip Lindsay seem to be the guys who are going to carry the load here. And we'll get into where I have Nahim Heinz, and spoiler alert, I have Nahim Heinz all the way down at RB26 for the week. That might be a little bit low, but there is a lot of, I think, unknown when it comes to how this backfield is going to shake out. Jonathan Taylor himself, couldn't really get a whole lot going, right?
Yeah.
On this offense. So, is there going to be a split between these two guys? Is Nahim Heinz going to get, most of the work, a lot of the work, all the work? There's a lot of questions here. How are you treating this backfield today?
I'm treating it, I think, you say I'm not really a big fan of your rankings. I think Nahim Heinz is ranked appropriately here because Jonathan Taylor couldn't get fantasy production going in this offense. And I don't think Nahim Heinz is going to get much more production going either. Denver is a very good defense. That's what's been carrying them through the games. That's the whole reason they're 2-2. If their defense didn't play as well, I could see Denver being 1-3, 0-4 right now. But needless to say, they've been eating offenses alive so far, except for the Raiders, apparently, which we'll talk about. But Nahim Heinz, he's not a talent upgrade over Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor couldn't get it going. The offensive line for Indianapolis has been bad, and Matt Ryan's been turning the ball over like crazy. I'm expecting more of the same to continue. I think Nahim Heinz, it's not going to be a problem of him not getting his touches. I think he'll get the touches, but I don't think that his overall volume, he's not going to be on the field enough to have that big week that we might want him to have in relief of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. There are a couple of things to, be, if you want to be positive about Nahim Heinz, you can find reasons to. Denver has allowed 5.4 yards per carry to running backs, which is second only behind the Chargers. Not something that I expected, honestly, when I was looking at these stats. They haven't given up a ton of receptions to running backs, and that's where Nahim Heinz, you would figure that's where he would get a lot of his work. But here are the running backs they played against so far. Rashad Penny, Damian Pierce, Jeff Wilson. Those guys aren't really big pass catchers anyway, not really involved in the pass game a ton. And Jacobs last week in his new role ended up catching 5 or 6 balls. So I think Heinz has some upside. I think he'll be okay in this game. And also if the Colts are, if they do go down this game, which, you never know with Denver's offense, but they are playing in Denver. Russell Wilson looked a lot better last week. Heinz does have a chance to rack up some catches. The Colts are 3.5 point underdogs tonight. So there is some chances for Nahim Heinz to do his thing. I just don't think I can rank him above, kind of like the more sure things, I would say. Going into week 5.
I think that's fair. I'm not. I mean, we've seen Nahim Heinz do his thing even with Jonathan Taylor on the field, but I said just the offense overall in Indianapolis, I don't think is very fantasy conducive. They haven't been scoring many touchdowns. So
now Michael Pittman staying on the same side of the ball. Michael Pittman, is likely going to be shadowed by Patrick Surtain. It's going to be a little bit of a tough matchup. Quarterbacks have been targeting Patrick Surtain, 25, 26% of routes against him, but he's been holding his own this year. So, number one wide receivers haven't necessarily gone crazy against these guys. Denver has allowed the third least fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers this year. So not great for Michael Pittman this year. However, I'm starting him. I'm starting him as a, top 13, top 14 wide receiver. This isn't a situation where I'm looking to bench Michael Pittman. I understand last week he didn't get it done. They were double teaming the shit out of him. What you want is one-on-one coverage, when it comes to guys like Michael Pittman, because when that happens, they're more likely to get the ball, right? If they're doubled, if they're bracketed, the quarterbacks just aren't going to be targeting them. And in this situation, if Surtain is on him and he's not getting a whole lot of help and they're not double teaming him, that's better. I prefer that personally.
I hear you. Michael Pittman, he's a start, regardless of who he's going up against. And usually, and I don't have any stats right now to back this up, but usually when you look at matchups, big name matchups, a top receiver versus top corner, usually the top receiver is able to get it done. It's not like they just get shut down and they don't do anything, especially in a division game like that. No, it's not a division game, but in a game where Michael Pittman's going to be the only guy pretty much for the Colts offensively catching the ball. I mean, Mo Alley-Cox did have that game last week. He did good in the red zone. He got 2 touchdown catches there, but the Colts offense
they're going to have to depend on him tonight, right? Like they don't have Jonathan Taylor. Like he's their cog, right, in their offense, or at least what they want him to be the cog in their offense. He hasn't necessarily been that cog this season. But Michael Pittman, they're going to have to find ways to get him involved if they have any chance of winning this game.
And granted, he was a little banged up, but now the Colts have pretty much been stripped of their identity fully. Before it was going into the season, they figured that John's offensive line would have the run game going. It would help Matt Ryan, and that hasn't come together at all. Now they're missing Jonathan Taylor, the guy that was supposed to make it happen on the ground, and they still have that bad offensive line. So somebody has to produce for the Colts for them to have any type of chance tonight. And Michael Pittman, like you said, he has to be that guy. If he's not, then that's pretty bad news for this Colts offense because they're already not very good defensive football.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's about it for the Colts. On the other side of the ball, we have Melvin Gordon, who I'm also not really ranking too high. I do have him as a low-end RB2 this week at RB22, and we'll get there. But the thing with Gordon is that, dude, the Broncos trust him, right? And if I had to guess, it's not like I'm not saying that I'd rather have Mike Boone on my roster than Melvin Gordon right now. If I have Melvin Gordon on my roster, I feel pretty good in terms of him continuing to get the opportunity, in Javonte Williams' place. But the matchup is not amazing for him this week. And, I like to be conservative. This is his first week as the 1A in this backfield. At the rate that he's been fumbling, who knows if the Broncos staff trust him. So that's the reason why I'm kind of like a little iffy to place him, above as like a solid RB2 this week. He does have RB1 upside because if he gets all the work, right, that Javonte Williams was getting, and then the work that he was getting, that's RB1 type of work. However, the Colts have been the third best defense in the NFL against the run. They're only allowing 3.1 yards a carry. But this ends up being a close game. If Denver ends up going ahead, I think Gordon can rack up some work. And if he does rack up some work, then he will end up breaking one here or there. I think he's still a good running back. I think he's had a pretty rough start to the season. But I think with some opportunity, if he kind of focuses on not losing the ball and not fumbling, I think he'll be all right.
Yeah, I think he could pick up the slack here for the season. He's disappointed fantasy managers. Not that we were expecting too much out of him these first 4 weeks, but he's dropped the ball a lot and hasn't demonstrated the ability to secure the ball very well. But I think he could bounce back here. I think 22, having him ranked at 22, is relatively conservative. I kind of have him as a low RB2, and that's where you have him ranked here. I think he has RB2 upside. I'm not sure if he has RB1 upside this week. Like we said, it's a tough matchup against Indianapolis. But, Russell Wilson looked more like Russell Wilson, which is encouraging for me overall because that means the pass catchers are going to get more work. If Melvin Gordon can catch a few balls, that would be great for him. I don't know how Mike Boone is going to rotate in. He might get the passing down work. We'll have to see. It's a big unknown right now. Like, it's the battle of the backup running backs tonight. We're going to figure out a lot more than we're going to know a lot more coming out of this game than we do going into it. Although Melvin Gordon, if I had to pick between Nahim Heinz and Melvin Gordon, I'd be starting Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And as far as Russell Wilson goes, I have him ranked as my QB 15 this week. The Colts haven't let up a ton of fantasy points to quarterbacks. They held Patrick Mahomes, relatively in check in week 3. That was the best quarterback that they went up against. And, Wilson, he only has one good game under his belt. So I don't want to, jump the gun and assume that he's going to be a top 12 guy. So I have my QB 15. I do like a couple other quarterbacks over him. I think they have a better chance of making it into that top 10, top 12 ranks this week when it's all said and done. Who else we got? We got Courtland Sutton. I have him also pretty high. I have him around wide receiver 13, wide receiver 14-ish. His matchup also isn't amazing. I don't think Stefan Gilmore is going to be shadowing him. Stefan Gilmore has actually been playing pretty well. So like, he's actually, let me see the rate that he's being targeted at. Yeah, Stefan Gilmore, when he's being targeted, is allowing, 0.36 fantasy points per route run. That isn't amazing in terms of like him shutting people down. So I'm not really worried about this matchup. If you look at what Indy has given up this season, on Stefan Gilmore's side, they've been pretty stout. But overall, the fourth least fantasy points to wide receivers this year. But that also has to do a lot with the fact that the Indy has been a slow offense. And because of that, they haven't been giving up a lot of plays. But on a per play basis, they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of defending wide receivers. So I wouldn't necessarily be trying to take Sutton out of my lineup or anything like that. He's going to be in your lineup as a high-end wide receiver 2, borderline wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I think you can start Sutton with confidence. And I think so far he's been matchup proof. He's produced pretty much exactly the same in all 4 of his games, even with the Broncos offense being in a lull. So if the Broncos offense can find a footing, we saw a little bit of it last week against the Raiders, even though they did lose. If Russell Wilson can get back to looking like Russell Wilson like he did last week, Courtland Sutton's his ceiling could be very high, because even while the offense has been underperforming, he's been performing perfectly fine. He's had at least, I think, 7 targets in every game, and he's put up double-digit fantasy points every game, PPR-wise. There's no reason to not start him. Courtland Sutton, I'm not going to, beat around the bush here. He's a solid starter for you with wide receiver 1 upside. He's wide receiver 2 every week, guaranteed. And not low end, he's high end.
Jerry Jeudy, I think he is a decent start this week. He's probably going to be ranked as a wide receiver 3 for me, maybe a mid wide receiver 3. I think he'll be solid. This is a neutral matchup against Kenny Moore out of the slot. That's where Jeudy runs most of his routes from. So he'll be fine. I love the matchup last week. He was able to get it done for you this week. Neutral matchup. So, not necessarily a must start, but most likely if you're in a regular 10 or 12 team league, he's going to be in your lineup.
Right.
And I think that's it. Am I missing anybody? I think that's about it. It's in terms of Mike Boone and Latavius Murray. Like, I'm not really, starting these guys. Mike Boone is more of a wait and see for me. Or, if you're in a 14-team league, desperate flex situation. If you're a 12-team league that's starting 2 flexes, maybe, he's a desperate flex. What do you think about Philip Lindsay? Do you think, he ends up getting a little bit of run here? Who would you rather start today if you had choice between Mike Boone and Philip Lindsay?
Mike Boone. It's not really close. We heard that Philip Lindsay might get a little work, but I'm not betting on that. Nahim Heinz is technically, he's the RB1 now with Jonathan Taylor out, and I don't think they're going to stray too far away from him in the backfield. We know Mike Boone is going to have some sort of workload, and I'm just kind of betting on the confidence on that because we saw him last week in relief of Javonte Williams. So I'm betting on the solid workload that Mike Boone's probably going to have, even though it might not be very much. It's going to be there. I know that. Philip Lindsay, we haven't seen him all season. We're not sure what he's going to look like. Like I said, that Colts offense isn't that good. I'm not going to be starting Philip Lindsay over Mike Boone. I'm not really paying much mind to Philip Lindsay at all unless he has some tremendous night. Like, I'm expecting 4 or 5 carries. He might have 20 yards. And if there's a catch, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, that's about it. Philip Lindsay should be off your radar right now.
Yeah.
You have to be really, really desperate in order to put Philip Lindsay in your lineup. All right, let's move over to our quarterback rankings. I think that's about it for our Thursday Night Football preview. And no surprise here, I have Josh Allen as my number 1 quarterback. The Bills have the highest implied total for the week against the Steelers at home. Crazy to think that last week's performance was a down week for him. He still got it done for you in a big way. Lamar Jackson at number 2 here. Vegas is expecting this game to be very close. The Ravens are only favored by 3 points at home. So this has the makings of a shootout. And Joe Burrow, should have no issues putting up numbers, up with his weapons against a Ravens secondary, giving up a ton of production right now. So this is what you want for Lamar to reach his ceiling. Josh Allen went up against this secondary last week. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't ideal for his wide receivers to absolutely go apeshit. Right. But I think Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are both, going to be really, really high-end starters this week. Lamar Jackson can absolutely have another 40-point game this week. For you. There'll be 3 40-point games in 4 weeks, whatever it was.
Is that Faraz's bold prediction for this week? Lamar tops 40 again?
I think so, man. I think so. I don't see how he doesn't end up doing it. But yeah. So it's in terms of like you could see that I have Joe Burrow here pretty high, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason, because I do think this is going to end up being a shootout. I have him above Joe. I have him above Justin Herbert and Kyla Murray, because the Ravens are extremely vulnerable to their wide receivers, and obviously Joe Burrow has three of the best, one of the best wide receiver trios in the league. Definitely one of the best wide receiver duos, if not the best wide receiver duo in the league. So I expect him to put up big numbers, and I expect Lamar Jackson to be putting up big numbers as well. So them going back and forth, I love Joe Burrow this week.
Yeah, and historically we've seen, tremendous fantasy outings between the Ravens and the Bengals. Both directions. Lamar Jackson having big days I remember, was it during his MVP season, just ripping up the middle for 60-yard touchdown and with that one spin move, you remember that? And then was it last year where the Bengals just absolutely torched the Ravens and Joe Burrow threw it for like 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns? It was a huge game. So this matchup itself has been very good for fantasy in the past few years, and it's not going to stop. It's going to be an awesome matchup. I believe this is the 8:20 game, the nighttime primetime game on Sunday.
It is.
So yeah, expect fireworks. It's going to be a huge game. We could say it seems like we've been saying this about every Ravens game this year. But there's no reason not to. Lamar Jackson has that rushing upside. I think he has one of the safest floors every week because of his rushing ability. And Joe Burrow, their Bengals are starting to look like the Bengals again. So I'd love to see this be a high scoring game, and I think it will.
We have Jalen Hurts at number 3 against Arizona. Patrick Mahomes at number 4. He's going up against Vegas at home. They have the highest over-under of the week for that game. The second highest implied total for the Chiefs. So plug Patrick Mahomes in there. I was going to put Joe Burrow above Mahomes, but I think Mahomes is going to do his thing in Vegas as well. And then followed by Justin Herbert at number 6. And that's kind of where one of the tiers end for me.
Yeah.
And then I have these other guys, Kyla Murray, Tom Brady, Carson Wentz, Derek Carr. Vegas, has the Cards, let's see, at an applied total of only 22 points this week. A little bit of a tough matchup against Philly, even though it's at home. Kyla Murray and this offense just overall has struggled for the most part. They haven't looked great. Cliff Kingsbury, he's making do with what he has, but he's not an ideal offensive coach for the NFL, and it's showing, over the first few weeks. The good thing is they have Kyla Murray, they have some weapons, and they're getting it done whichever way they can. But Kyla Murray is somebody that even in a bad game he could still put up 20 for you, and if he rushes one in, he ends up with like 25, right? Which is what he did last week. So even in a not so great matchup, Kyla Murray can still do his thing.
I look at Kyla Murray, and he's really keeping the Cardinals afloat right now, at least on offense. It wasn't any more evident than against that game against Las Vegas, where they came back and then he ran like 80 yards on the 2-point conversion and ran it in himself for 2 points. Like, Kyler Murray, I don't have any worries about him. People might be worried that his production hasn't been necessarily what we expected it to be. He's usually the guy that's off to a hot start and then he slows down a little bit at the end of the season. That's not the case. He's been kind of mid-tier. He's been a good start for you every week, but he hasn't had the ceiling that you were looking for when you drafted him. I think it's only going to keep better. I think right now, and a lot of people in the fantasy community would agree, that you could probably target him and buy him a little bit low because when he gets his weapons back, he's going to be much better, I think, fantasy-wise. The whole offense overall will be better fantasy-wise. But I think for now, Kyler Murray, especially against a tough matchup in Philly, even though they are in Arizona, I think that 7 is appropriate. He's going to produce for you regardless because of his rushing ability, and it's only up from here. So I think he is fair. He's the top end of the second tier of quarterbacks you can start. Justin Herbert just has a slightly better floor. All the other guys do too. But I like Kyler Murray. He's edging on that territory before we get to the Tom Brady's and Carson Wentz's.
Yeah, the Tom Brady's and Carson Wentz's. Put them in the same category. But yeah, I have Brady at 8 here, even higher than I did last week. But the Bucs have the third highest implied total for the week. He has Chris Godwin back. He threw for 385 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. Granted, he had to throw it a ton with Casey up all game. But his receivers have good matchups this week, against Atlanta. So, now that Godwin's back, I like Brady a lot more for fantasy. 3 of 4 quarterbacks so far going up against Atlanta, they were able to put up very solid fantasy days against them. Matt Stafford has been terrible this year, and his one good game was against Atlanta. So I think Brady ends up, having a pretty good week on Sunday.
Yeah, I think Tom Brady has a very safe floor because of the matchup. Like we said, Tom Brady hasn't looked like Tom Brady, and whether that's just missing guys on offense or dealing with Giselle off field, that remains to be seen.
Oh, of course, we had to bring it up. Of course, I was trying not to bring it up. We had to bring it up. All right.
But yeah, so regardless of what it is, he hasn't looked the same as he was last season, especially for fantasy purposes. This is, if I'm not mistaken, his worst start, I think, with the Buccaneers in terms of fantasy football. So he hasn't looked the same, but I think he can get back to that because now he has, like you said, Chris Godwin is back. Mike Evans is still there. He's going to have his full complement of weapons, and it's a plus matchup. You can have him ranked at 8. I think that's fair. His ceiling might not necessarily be there, but his floor is super, super, super high, especially in this matchup. So yeah, 8 is good.
I think so. I had Carson Wentz back at number 9, and this one is like way above consensus. I think consensus rankings have him at like number 16 or 17 or something like that this week. But like we talked about this before, right? Like Wentz had 2 tough matchups, but I do expect him to bounce back this week. The Titans defense, they gave up 356 passing yards to Matt Ryan last week. And through 4 games, Tennessee has given up 10 passing touchdowns. So this is a pass first offense. Even without Jahan Dotson, I think Wentz should get it done.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I am a little bit leery because, Carson Wentz, he tends to go on, streaks where he's not so good, and he's been rattled the past 2 games. It's going to come down to the pass protection for me. I don't think the Titans have anyone you have to be scared of with pass rushing. So this could end up being a plus matchup for Carson Wentz. I think not having Jahan Dotson does hurt a little bit because I think of all the Washington receivers, he showed the best connection with Dotson. And that might be surprising. I'm not surprised. I thought that Dotson was very good. I thought he was like I said, he's a solid receiver, very QB friendly. But I think this might open the door. If Carson Wentz can have a day like we're projecting him to have, it might open the door for guys like Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel to show up again and be a little bit more fantasy relevant than they have been. I like Carson Wentz here, but I think there's also his range of outcomes is pretty wide. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up underperforming just because this is so high.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm looking to acquire Carson Wentz in a lot of leagues, especially 2 quarterback leagues. I think his ceiling is just at the point, his ceiling is high, and he showed that ceiling in week 1 and week 2. I just think the offense is just conducive to fantasy points, especially in the pass game.
Right.
We got Derrick Henry at number 10 here. Tom Brady just threw 3 touchdowns and almost 400 yards against the Chiefs last week, and granted that's Tom Brady. Matt Ryan, though, he threw 2 touchdowns the week before that. Justin Herbert threw 3 touchdowns in week 2. Kyla Murray 2 touchdowns in week 1. I think Carr should have a solid game against KC. And this is the highest total for the week. And also there's a chance that Renfro is back. He did return to practice yesterday in a limited capacity, and that's a good sign for him to come back from that concussion. And him to be cleared from the concussion protocol. So I think Derek Carr, I think this week will be fine. Anytime I put Derek Carr in my top 10, it never works out. But because it's Derek Carr, and I blame him, not me. If he has a bad game, don't blame me, because he has it set up for this week. You know what I'm saying? So I would still have him in my lineup this week. I think he's a solid start.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on to 11 through 20 here. We got Kirk Cousins at number 11, Trevor Lawrence at 12. Kirk Cousins, the Vikings are tied for the 5th highest implied total on the week against Chicago. Chicago's defense, they're a slow offense. They run the ball a lot. It is possible that they're able to control the game a little bit just because of the fact that the Vikings are not a good run defense. And if Chicago ends up, controlling the clock, that isn't a great thing for the Vikings. However, I trust Vegas here, and they seem to like the Vikings to score a ton of points. That's one of the reasons why I like Dalvin Cook this week as well. But we saw what Saquon Barkley was able to do against Chicago last week. But I think Kirk Cousins is relatively safe. I think he should be ranked as a quarterback 1. Given the fact that these quarterbacks under him, might not have as great of matchups. Like I have Trevor Lawrence against Houston. I think the Jaguars are going to score some points this week for sure. But I think a lot of it's going to come in the run game rather than the pass game. And, for me, you can have Lawrence at 11. I think Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, I think these guys are like relatively interchangeable
Yeah.
for this week. So they're kind of in the same tier for me. I don't really I'm not really I don't feel strongly about any of these guys. The reason why I have Kirk Cousins at 11 is because of that implied total.
Yeah.
Jared Goff at 13, despite all the quarterback issues in New England, the Patriots are favored in this game. And there's a 46.5 total. So
Yeah.
which I'm kind of surprised about. And Lamar, he was the only quarterback to really go off on the Patriots so far. So I don't have as high expectations after Goff's huge game last week. I remember, Goff can come back down to earth. He's not like the superstar quarterback. He got it done last week against the Seahawks, a much better matchup for him. And he's going to be up and down just like he has this year. So he's not like a slam dunk just because he did well last week.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised that maybe the Patriots are favored in that game.
Me too.
I
Me too.
actually have the Lions winning that one, but that's nothing to do with fantasy. I think the offense in Detroit is very much improved. The defense in New England might be good, but I think the Lions are going to score points regardless. And I don't know how many points the Patriots are going to be able to put up. I mean, obviously they hung with Green Bay last week, but I'm not sure it's going to be repeated again.
I know. That's why I'm surprised too.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that they're favored.
So I'm okay with Jared Goff at 13. I'd say Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence are interchangeable. I'm bumping Jared Goff down just a little bit because it is a tough matchup and they're on the road. But Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence are interchangeable. They're very similar, I think, in terms of the way they've been producing this year. Kirk Cousins, I think the matchup is just a little bit better. Houston isn't horrendous. They just haven't won games. All of the games have been relatively close, even if they were coming back from being down in a deficit. And we're not sure, obviously. Obviously, Jacksonville looks much better, much improved from last year, but we're still not sure if there's a clear-cut team. At least I'm not over Houston right now. This will be telling for me. I think Trevor Lawrence will score points, but I'm not sure if it's going to be a humongous day like other quarterbacks have had against them.
Yeah, I mean, they've only allowed 4 passing touchdowns in 4 games.
Right.
Houston has. So this might not be the best matchup. Like on paper, it might seem, it's Houston. They suck.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, they only averaged 1 passing touchdown per game. I mean, they're obviously giving up a ton on the ground, and that's where teams are going to be trying to win. And I think that's why I have Damian Pierce ranked very high this week. I think he's going to go off potentially. But Trevor Lawrence, he's still a top quarterback. He should be fine.
Yeah.
I got Aaron Jones. I'm sorry, not Aaron Jones. I got Aaron Rodgers at number 14 here. He hasn't really showed his ceiling this year. He hasn't surpassed 17 fantasy points in regular 4-point passing touchdown scoring. The matchup this week is all right. But I can see this being all about the running backs this week, as the Packers. They're favored by more than a touchdown in London. It's possible that Daniel Jones doesn't even play. And if he doesn't, that would really suck. So I can see the Packers controlling this game through. This mean a lot of Aaron Jones and a lot of AJ Dillon.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The Giants, the thing that's been keeping the Giants afloat has been the defense. And Aaron Rodgers, he's still building that connection with receivers, the receivers that he has, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. We've talked about them at length on this podcast. But I think Aaron Rodgers, you're seeing what you're going to get with him this season, unless somebody really steps up and this offense changes. Even though the receivers are starting to look better, and they're starting to look like they're gelling a little bit more with Aaron Rodgers, I think the offense still runs through the running backs. Aaron Rodgers is a very good talent. He could throw the ball very well, but the receivers he doesn't have a playmaker now like Davante Adams. And I don't want to chalk it all up to Davante Adams, but these are still young guys on the perimeter, on the outside, catching passes. Give it a little bit more time, but until then, Aaron Rodgers, I think he's kind of stuck at this ceiling. He keeps hitting that 17-point ceiling. I think he's going to be at that point for a little while yet, because Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are a great 1-2 in the backfield. They can lean on them, and especially in a game against New York where I could see them actually going up, it could be a running back day, like you said.
I got Russell Wilson at number 15. We talked about him already. Ryan Tannehill at 16, like one of those guys who just ends up getting it done for fantasy for you for the most part. Good matchup against Washington. Geno Smith at 17 here. Some people might be surprised that I have him that low, after, he's kind of been the talk of quarterbacks, after week 4. But it is a little bit of a tough matchup for him. It's not like he's been, killer every single week this year. The fact that they've upped the pace is a great thing, and that's good for him. It's positive for his prospects moving forward. But New Orleans is relatively tough matchup. Allowed only 3 touchdown passes in the last 4 weeks. Kirk Cousins looked relatively sharp. He did throw that pick. If I'm not mistaken, if it was tipped or it dropped past, something like that.
Yeah, I
But
think so.
he did throw the touchdown, 273 yards last week. But that New Orleans defense is relatively good, I would say. And they're going to be at home, so not necessarily my favorite matchup for Geno Smith. So I don't want to elevate him over these other guys here. Who would you rather play this week, Geno or Ryan Tannehill?
I'm gonna go with Geno. But then if you ask
Yeah.
me if I'm going to go Geno or Russell Wilson, who's the next highest ranked guy, I'm going Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Geno Smith has a higher ceiling than Ryan Tannehill.
Right.
Tannehill has the floor. But
Makes sense.
New Orleans is a tough matchup. I'll give him that. And we have seen Geno look like Geno Smith, and we've seen Geno look like Russell Wilson, which is fun to say. But so I think I'll take the chances on Geno Smith, even though Ryan Tannehill, he does have a good matchup against Washington. I'll take my chances with Geno Smith.
I hear that. I got Marcus Mariota at 18, Matthew Stafford at 19. Stafford's been terrible for fantasy this year. He's really hard to trust, and he's going up against Dallas, which is a tough defense. So I'm not putting Matthew Stafford in my lineup unless it's a 2-quarterback league. And even then, I might just put Jacoby Brissett in there instead, just so I can get a safe floor.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. The thing about Matthew Stafford is not only is he not putting up a whole lot of points, but he's throwing picks and he's turning the ball over. And that's negative points, and that's what's hurting him. If you take away the negative points, he's probably going to be ranked somewhere between 14 and 15. But he's just been turning the ball over.
Listen, he might be ranked as a top 12, top 13 quarterback if he wasn't throwing so many damn interceptions, man. Right. He's putting up the yards. But yeah, no, it's pretty bad.
He has 6 interceptions in 4 weeks. I think he's good for one of those against Dallas too. Especially with the pressure they're probably gonna be getting on him.
It's funny because every time my guy Zerk, who's also an Underdog partner, he tweeted at Underdog and said like, hey, like, can we get a line for a plus over 0.5 interceptions for Matt Stafford? And then Underdog replied to him and to his tweet, and with a screenshot of them adding it. So they did add it.
Nice. I thought you were going to say they're going to be like, no, and they make it one of those special offers. You know how they do it? It's like under 1 passing yard.
They literally added it for us so we can all choose that. So yeah, so take advantage of the Underdog. And if you don't know what Underdog is, you guys should check it out. Check out their pick'ems. I'm gonna have my pick'ems available on Instagram in a couple of hours tonight with all of my picks. And you guys should really take advantage of that because I've been on fire. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I've been on fire. And I just let you guys know what I have as a little preview. I have Nahim Heinz under 70.5 rushing receiving yards. I have Nahim Heinz 4 receptions. I have the over on that. Well, I'm not allowed to say over. What am I supposed to say? Higher than 4 receptions.
Michael Pittman. Sports. Not betting.
Michael Pittman higher than 5.5 receptions. I have Russell Wilson under 0.5 interceptions. I don't think he throws a pick tonight. I do think he will throw 2 touchdowns. So I have him higher than 1.5 touchdowns. So I have a bunch of these available. And you guys, all you got to do is just put a bunch of those picks together in one entry, and you can basically multiply your money. So if you choose 4 of them, you end up and you get them all right, you're going to text 10x whatever you put in. So if I put in $10, I'm getting $40 back. If I put in $50, I'm gonna get back $400. Is that right? What did I say? $50. I'm gonna end up getting $50 back, $500 back. I'm going crazy right now. If you choose 5 of those picks and you get all 5 of those right, you're gonna 20x your money in one night. Okay, so it's definitely worth trying out. So go over to Underdog Fantasy, download the app. Make sure you use the code UPPERHAND when you make your first deposit, because your first deposit will get doubled with that promo code UPPERHAND. All right, so make sure you check that out. We've been on fire. I said we've been on fire so many times now that I feel like I'm just jinxing the shit out of it. Like now, like we're gonna go for like 0 for 8.
Yeah, well, we're gonna ride it. We're gonna ride the momentum while we can, like we're riding Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's momentum.
It's true. And speaking of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, let's get into our running back rankings. I have him ranked pretty high, honestly. He's not in this top 10, but you'll see where he's at once we get there. But I have Saquon Barkley here at number 1, obviously, because he is killing it, and he's literally the only running back who you feel comfortable putting in your lineup. Him and Nick Chubb at this point, right? Mm-hmm. But he's playing in London. Saquon's actually from London.
Saquon's actually what?
From London.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
He's not. He's not
I
from
don't think
London.
so. I was gonna say,
He's not.
but
Nick Chubb at number 2, which is very unlike me.
yeah,
However, the Chargers are allowing 6.1 yards per carry to opposing running backs this season. They're allowing the third most fantasy points to running back. Chubb's already killing it. I don't see how you don't rank him this high as a top 2 running back. He's averaging only 0.1 PPR fantasy points per game, less than Saquon so far through 4 weeks.
yeah. I mean, this is like one of the most surprising developments, having Nick Chubb at 2. I thought there would be a lot more running backs higher than him because Nick Chubb has that role that isn't as fantasy conducive as, say, Saquon Barkley. The cool thing about Saquon Barkley is he got snaps at quarterback last week.
He did, because they have nobody left.
He has to be the RB1 this week, right? Maybe we rank him at quarterbacks. I don't know. But yeah, Saquon is pretty much unquestioned RB1 right now. Shout out to Saquon believers, because I didn't think that was going to happen. And same with Nick Chubb at 2. I didn't think we'd be ranking him this high either, but clearly his talent is getting it done. They're happy running the offense through Nick Chubb, and it's been giving them pretty much success. Like I said, I didn't see it coming with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. I didn't see it coming, but I'm happy that Nick Chubb's doing well. These are really the 1-2 that you can trust. Christian McCaffrey, I'd say you're close to trusting Christian McCaffrey after last week. See it again, you'll feel much better. But outside of that, I think any of these guys are liable to have like just a dud week. And talk about Nick Chubb. If you remember the last time Chargers and the Browns played, it was an absolute track meet. And Nick Chubb rushed for 160 yards and a touchdown. So we might be seeing more of that again this week.
I think so. I'm happy that McCaffrey got the receiving work last week. He caught all 9 of his targets for 81 yards. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see 25 carries from Christian McCaffrey. We want to see, 9-10 targets. This is a tough matchup for him for them this week, for the entire offense. Like Baker Mayfield going up against San Francisco, like I don't want to see that.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's scary to me. But Christian McCaffrey, he should come through, if he sees another boatload of targets, and that's what we're hoping for.
I think that's very much in the cards. Especially say, Nick Bosa, I think, has the chance to really make Baker Mayfield look bad, and that could result in him kind of being benched. If we could see Baker Mayfield kind of pulled out and Sam Darnold goes in, Christian McCaffrey might have a higher ceiling. It wouldn't be much higher, but he might have a higher ceiling. Obviously, the quarterback situation in Carolina is pretty bad. But Christian McCaffrey, he looked good last week. He caught all of his targets. I think they're going to have to go to him many times because the pass rush is going to be getting to Baker Mayfield. I like Christian McCaffrey as the outlet man. He's going to get a bunch of targets again. I think you'll be pleased with where he finishes this week.
I think it's going to happen in terms of that quarterback change. The only thing that's stopping that from happening is that Sam Darnold isn't healthy yet. And
right.
And Matt Rule multiple times, over the past 2 weeks, multiple times he's like, "Hey, like, what do you think about Sam? You think Sam can get a shot at quarterback?" He's like, Sam's not healthy yet, but he never says that Baker's my guy. Baker's our guy. He's never been saying that. He's just like, Darnold's just not healthy.
Yeah,
he's not ready.
Rough.
So like
it's so bad
happen.
in Carolina.
Once Darnold's healthy, they're gonna make that quarterback switch.
I didn't even know Sam Darnold wasn't healthy. That is my
bad.
Yeah,
he's still a little banged up. Yeah. But yeah, it's gonna happen.
I'm calling. We're calling for it. Baker Mayfield's performance is like, even if he's injured, put him in. It's just something, please.
All right, I got Joe Mixon here at number 4. This is about 4 or 5 spots above consensus as well, but he's been getting some serious opportunity this year, and it's going to turn into a blow-up game at some point. And in this game, like we talked about before, there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game, and the Ravens on the low, they're allowing 4.8 yards per carry to running backs. So I think this is an opportunity for Joe Mixon to potentially have a pretty decent game. This game is going to be conducive to a ton of fantasy points, and like looking at these other guys like Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, like I think I'd rather have Joe Mixon in my lineup right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like you said about the usage, it's been there this whole season. The production has matched it some days, not so much other days. I think he had a quiet week last week. So
ton of work, just a quiet week.
I'm remembering now. It's coming back to me. He had like 24 carries for 60 yards. Like, if he's any more efficient with those carries, even, he's going to have a much better fantasy day. I think we're in line to see a big game from both offenses, like we talked about already when we talked about Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Mixon has quietly been, one of the best utilized running backs in the league so far. I think having him at 4 isn't crazy. I don't think it's like it might be over consensus, but I don't think it's out of proportion the way we're ranking him this week.
No, I don't think so. We have Derrick Henry at number 5. We have Dalvin Cook at number 6. Derrick Henry's been getting it done over the past 2 weeks, so I'm going to keep starting him. Obviously, he's one of the guys that you don't take out of your lineup at this point. Dalvin Cook, I think this is a get right spot for him. He was on his way to a huge game in Detroit, before he got hurt.
Yeah.
And I think he should be able to get it done against the Chicago defense, who has given up 4.8 yards per carry this year. Minnesota should have no problem controlling this game, unless Chicago ends up, controlling the clock with the run game. But in terms of the score, I think Dalvin Cook is going to end up, getting some work, getting a lot of work because of that, because it's going to be a positive game script. Minnesota also has the 6th highest implied total for the week. So Vegas does believe that Minnesota is going to be scoring a lot of points in this game.
Yep, that's fair. I think, we saw Dalvin Cook last week. He didn't look bad. It was just, a Justin Jefferson day. And we said that last time in week 1 that Justin Jefferson had a day. The fact remains, he's still getting the usage that we want him to. And it's been the same story with Joe Mixon. He hasn't produced like it. His blow-up game is coming, and Chicago might be a good spot for that to happen. Because
I think
you
so.
like you said about the game script, I'm kind of just repeating what you said, but you can't say it enough. His usage is just right there.
I also don't think that Madison, like last week, Madison ended up getting like goal line work. I don't think that's going to happen all the time, right? So like, that touchdown that went to Madison, I think Dalvin Cook is going to be their primary goal line guy. Like Madison will vulture some here and there, but I'm not worried about it. I don't think they're going to take that role away from Dalvin Cook.
No, and like I said, if you look at his Alexander Madison's production last week, it might look like he has more of a role, but it was a catch and a touchdown from 15 yards out on a 3rd and 15. So it's not sustainable, the production that he had in the red zone. I think, like you said, Dalvin Cook's the guy.
Austin Eckler, I have him at number 7. James Robinson, I have at number 8. And this might seem a little high, but listen, the Texans have been absolutely terrible when it comes to defending running backs. We know that James Robinson has got it done in a big way over the first 3 weeks of the season. Had a tough matchup last week, but the Texans have allowed 5 yards per carry to running backs on the ground this year. They've allowed the most fantasy points to the position by far through 4 weeks. So, with the Jaguars likely controlling this game, I think Robinson should have a game script as well that could lead to a huge workload.
100%. We saw what Austin Eckler did. Austin Eckler was able to get right, against Houston last week, and I think it could be the same thing for James Robinson. Not that he has to get right, but he had a tough matchup, like you said, in Philly, in a monsoon almost. Can't really hold that one against him. I'd like him to get back definitely to the production that he had the first few weeks of the season. I think he's good for a rushing touchdown in this game, and more. If he could break a run or two, he'll be fine. I don't think Houston is anybody scared of running into. Maybe Travis Etienne even, gets a little bit of extra work in this game. Maybe if they want to keep him fresh, if that's what's working for the offense, they could use Etienne and Robinson the same way. But I think Robinson has established himself as the lead back. You don't have to worry about Travis Etienne cutting James Robinson's workload out too much that he's not going to produce. And
it is possible. I just want to say that because they did get the same amount of carries last week.
Right.
And the rushing share has, every single week it's been getting closer to even. And, it is possible that they just kind of wanted Travis Etienne to get used to the NFL because this is his first 4 games in the NFL.
Right.
However, I have a lot more confidence that James Robinson will be the lead back. His yards after contact per attempt has gone down each of the last 4 weeks, and he looked really good after contact in week 1 and looked good in week 2, but it has gone down. His efficiency has gone down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Something to kind of just keep in mind. However, that's not affecting how I'm ranking him this week. I think he's going to be able to kind of get right, against the Texans. I think a lot of running backs do.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams at number 9. Obviously he was able to get it done last week. 2 touchdowns on the ground. Did he get 2? I think he had 2, right? If I'm not mistaken. He definitely had 100 yards on the ground. He had the volume as well. So he was able to get it done for you in a big way.
Yeah. Jamal Williams, you talk about him.
Touchdowns, right?
Yeah, he has 2 touchdowns. He has 2 touchdowns in 3 or 4 games on the ground. So he's been a touchdown machine. He's actually the outright touchdown leader for scrimmage touchdowns outside of quarterbacks too. So, you can start him with confidence. And he has those games, even with DeAndre Swift on the field for those first 3. So
crazy. I have Khalil Herbert here at number 10. I just think that, like we talked about a couple times already, that the Bears, they want to establish the run. He got the work last week. He got a ton of volume, and he was playing on like 85 or 90% of snaps last week. So he was the every down back for the Bears.
Right.
And Minnesota, they're not great against the run. They've allowed 4.5 yards per carry to running backs, and I think that this is going to end up being a game where he can rack up volume and rack up production.
Yep, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that because that's all the Bears can do, and that's all the Bears plan to do. Evidently, I don't think they're ashamed of it. They're just going to run the ball. They don't seem to trust Justin Fields. The only way that they're going to be able to produce on offense is through the running game. Khalil Herbert is the RB1 on that offense as long as David Montgomery isn't playing. You can start him with confidence this week.
I agree. All right. We got at number 11, we got Aaron Jones here. Daniel Jones might not play this week, but regardless, like this feels like a game where the Packers will depend on their running game to close it out, even just to start it out. But the Giants have allowed 5.1 yards per carry so far through 4 games to running backs. That's not good. Mm-hmm. So I think Green Bay, we mentioned Aaron Rodgers, them not depending on the pass game, and Green Bay will likely attack the Giants on the ground. So Aaron Jones, we were a little worried after week 1, but since then, he's been having a very solid workload, and I would be happy to start him as a low end RB1 this week.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like we talked about, and you just said about the Packers might not be going to the air as much. They might just rely on the ground game because that's what the Giants have kind of been weak to. Aaron Jones is a very, very good running back, fantasy running back. His usage has been there. Not necessarily what we've come to expect. Since A.J. Dillon's been around, his workload hasn't been what it can be. But he's still a very good running back. I like Aaron Jones, even though, he'll have his off games. He'll also have his blow-up games. No reason not have him in your lineup. That's game-winning, week-winning potential at running back.
On the low, Josh Jacobs has been legit. And the Chiefs, too, they've been a good rushing defense. They've allowed the 4th least yards per carry to running backs, only 3.1 yards a carry, and the least amount of rushing yards in the NFL to running backs. Now, last week, you saw what happened, right? The Bucs completely abandoned the run, right? Mm-hmm. Leonard Fournette only had 3 carries. Rashad White only got 3 carries. Now, check this out. The Chiefs have also allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs because of how much they've killed them through the air. They've allowed the most receptions and receiving yards to running backs. And now with what seems like a new role for Josh Jacobs, 89% of snaps, 73% route participation, 20% target share last week, all the 2-minute snaps, we might be seeing a new Josh Jacobs. And that's why I have him ranked a lot higher than I normally would.
Mm-hmm. And you don't want to overreact, to a 34-point performance like he had last week in PPR at least. But the workload, it's not that the usage hasn't been there. It's not that the workload hasn't been there. He's been getting that workload. It just recently, at least on the ground, it just recently came on these past 2 weeks that he's getting work through the air. And he's really capitalized on that. He's caught, I think, 10 of 11 targets over the past 2 weeks. So he's making money in the passing game. That's definitely upping his floor. But, it seems like Josh Jacobs is the new cog in the offense. We thought it would be Devontae Adams, and Derek Carr doesn't seem to want to throw to him, and Darren Waller's in that offense. Of all the fantasy assets that you have in that offense, was Josh Jacobs a guy that you think is going to be the focus of the offense? No, but it seems to be the case. Like I said, he's Mr. Usage for me. I mean, I've seen him. His production wasn't lining up. I've looked through his stats every week and been like, man, he's getting all these carries and all these targets. It hasn't really come together. Well, it came together against Denver. And I didn't really think it would because Denver's a good defense. But he finally capitalized. He kind of broke out for this season. I think that he could be, a really good running back moving forward. He is the RB7. He's benefiting a lot from that humongous game that he had last week. But I think if he can settle down right in that 20-point range, you got yourself a very strong low-end RB1. That's how I deploy him this week.
Yeah. Alvin Kamara, I have him at number 13. I would normally have him higher, but hey, we haven't seen him play in a couple of weeks. He said that he was going to play this week. So, hopefully he is. He's still, I don't think he's practicing full yet. I think he got a limited in on Wednesday. So just keep an eye on that. He had limited practices all week last week and ended up not playing. So keep an eye on his status going into the weekend. He said he will play. Don't necessarily trust his word for it. But, if he's out there, I would play him. Jamal Williams was able to get it done last week against the Seahawks. This is a decent matchup. Have him in your lineup if he doesn't end up playing.
And Mr. Fly to London and then decide he's not going to play 10 minutes before game time.
Hey, man, he just wanted a trip. He just wanted to see Big Ben and London Bridge and all that. You know what I'm saying? He just wanted a little trip out of it.
Sometimes he's
paid for.
He's getting the was he there? Would he have PTSD from the Minneapolis Miracle? It's the Vikings that were playing. Maybe that's what kept him out.
He was probably there. Yeah, he must have been, right?
What was that, 2017? I think that was his rookie season. But yeah, maybe he just didn't want to face that again.
I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 14. I want to trade him away before the luck runs out, but if I have him, he's going to be in my lineup until that luck runs out.
Yeah. That's what I said. Like, nobody expected him to continue this production, but it's just keeps going. And that's why I said, we talked about it yesterday on the buy sell pod. We said, he's like the ideal trade piece because you're looking for someone to trade. His value just keeps appreciating and he's doing it while he's in your lineup. So, you can't really go wrong with that type of production. It's not sustainable. We're going to keep calling him out on it. If this rides out all the way through the season, we will happily take the L, but I don't think this is going to continue.
Leonard Fournette, I have him at 15 here. That's quite the drop from where I had him in week 3. And part of the reason for that is Rashad White was pretty involved last week. And this is not something we really went over, I don't think, in the review last week on Monday. But Rashad White, he was involved from the beginning of that game. And it wasn't even like, this was garbage time where he was really getting it done. He got it done. He was being used in the passing game as well. So if this is a thing moving forward, that's not good for Leonard Fournette. This is something that we, talked about in the offseason because we really liked Rashad White and him and his ability in the pass game. And he was able to show that, this week, this past week. So, we don't know that this is going to be a permanent thing or not. We don't know if Fournette was dealing with some sort of injury, but he wasn't on the injury report this week. So, moving forward, we'll see what that looks like. But I think that I can't rank him in the top 12 after what I saw this past week in terms of the usage.
Well, yeah, it was definitely skewed usage because, against the Chiefs, they were playing down immediately. So it might have changed their game plan a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact, I think Rashad White and Leonard Fournette, both against Kansas City, both got 3 carries. And Leonard Fournette went backwards. I think he had -3 rushing yards. And, it's easy to beat -3 rushing yards. Rashad White he only had 6 yards, but he did have a rushing touchdown. And he had work in the receiving game. The big takeaway for me isn't so much that, we should be worried about Leonard Fournette. I think it's going to go back to where it needs to be against Atlanta. Leonard Fournette's going to get his carries. And it'll be a much more balanced workload. I'm still a bigger fan of Leonard Fournette, obviously, going forward. I think he's still a low-end RB1 at worst. But what that told me about last week, the usage, is that if Leonard Fournette will go down, Rashad White, he's going to have tons of value. He's going to be a big producer. I think he might be an RB1 handcuff because you look at what he did in the receiving
He would be a top 6-7 running back.
Yeah,
if Leonard Fournette went down in this game, in week 6, he would be top 6 or 7 running back in my rankings.
Yeah, I think that's fair because, like I said, we were. I don't know about you, but I was wondering, okay, we talked up Rashad White this whole offseason. He hasn't really shown us much, he hasn't
gotten the opportunity until this past week.
That's what I mean. So last week, now he's showing us, okay, even with the limited opportunity he got, put up 14 points. Like, come on, this guy is going to be an elite handcuff for you. That's why we've been telling you to have him. We've had him on the waiver wire pod every time, I think, this year. We've been telling you to pick him up, stash him. Definitely worth it. We just saw what he can do. And I kind of got off track talking about Leonard Fournette, but Rashad White, real potential there.
For sure. I have Damian Pierce here at number 16. Not an ideal game script situation for Pierce, but the Texans have shown that they want their offense to be based around him, even if they're down a bit. I think regardless of game script at this point, like, he's going to be a solid RB2. He's kind of being used that way where if they're down, they're still going to kind of give him some work. So, and the talent, right? We saw what he's capable of. We're big fans of his, and the talent kind of outweighs this at this point. If we knew that he was going to be just taken off the field when they go down, that's one thing, but they haven't shown that. So I think that he's solid and he'll give you 15 plus carries, and he has the 20 carry upside if the game is relatively close.
Yeah, I like Damian Pierce for that. It seems like you said, regardless of the game script, he's going to be on the field. He actually got some receiving work last week, which was good. That's what we hadn't seen the first few weeks. There's no reason to think that he won't continue that production. RB2, definitely moving forward. With RB1 upside, weekly RB1 upside, I'd say.
For sure. Ramondre Stevenson, I have him here next. Like, he had another big week. 14 carries, 5 targets, 19 opportunities, 25% target share last week. He outsnapped Damien Harris and ran around on more than 50% of dropbacks. And that's the reason why he's being ranked above Damien Harris. And this week in particular, this is a really good matchup against Detroit. We saw what Rashad Penny was able to do last week. A few other running backs have done their thing against Detroit. So, Ramondre Stevenson, when you watch him play, like, he looks really good.
Yeah.
He looks like a really good running back. And, I'm not surprised that he is, out there more often than Damien Harris. Damien Harris I think he ended up out touching him in the run game. Yes, Damien Harris ended up having 18 carries in this game. And I think it's going to be a very similar this week in terms of both of these guys, getting enough carries for them to kind of get it done. And remember, Vegas has the Patriots favored in this game. So it seems to me like, if that holds up, the Patriots are going to be able to divvy up enough work for both of these guys for both of them to get it done.
Yeah, and then you also consider, that they're not going to have, presumably they're not going to have Mac Jones or maybe even Brian Hoyer. They're going to be operating presumably with a backup quarterback. So that spells just RB usage, and they're not going to necessarily be chucking it downfield, chucking it around the yard. I think that we're going to see plenty of ground game work for both of them, but also in the receiving game. I like Ramondre Stevenson to kind of replicate the line that he's had the past 2 weeks of like 5 targets.
Yep, exactly. Devin Singletary, I have him here at number 18. This might be low. I might want to move Singletary up to 16 above Damian Pierce, just because of the usage that he's had over the past 2 weeks. We talked about it, right? Devin Singletary, let's see. Devin Singletary, 87% of snaps last week, 76% route participation, 5 targets, 11 carries, 16 opportunities, 16% target share. Pretty good. That's serious opportunity right there. He kind of underperformed, and he's been one of our guys that we would try to buy. We talked about him yesterday. So I might move him above Damian Pierce this week, especially if you're in a PPR league, because he's been getting a ton of targets over the past couple weeks. And overall this season, I think he's at like the 3rd or 4th most targets. He's also ran the most routes of any running back in the entire NFL this season. So he's being used a ton. So I think I'm going to move him above Damian Pierce, especially in the PPR league. In a standard or half point, maybe I'll lean Pierce. But I think Singletary's usage, Ramondre Stevenson's usage might be a little bit close. I think the reason why I had Ramondre Stevenson over Singletary, because I think Stevenson has a better chance of knocking it into the end zone than Singletary does, because they don't really use him like in a goal line type capacity. So I might have Ramondre at, it seems about right. They're kind of in a similar range to me. How would you rank these 3 guys if you had to?
I like the way you have them. Just here on the graphic with Damian Pierce 16, Ramondre 17, Devin Singletary 18. With Devin Singletary, we talked about him being a buy, yes, but I think I'm not buying him as a mid RB2. I think he has low end RB2 appeal. I think that's kind of where his ceiling is. He does have the usage, but like you said, his touchdown ceiling seems to be pretty low. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Bills get in the red zone or close to the red zone, and they're calling run plays to Josh Allen, or they're calling pass plays that run all over the yard and then throw it to Isaiah McKenzie. It's like, I don't think that the offense, they're not very keen on running the ball just right up the middle with Devin Singletary at the goal line. They'll get the ball in the hands of Josh Allen, let him do his thing. But getting down there, he does have that receiving upside, like we said. It looks much better than it did last season. And he is a buy, but I'm not buying him to be, stronger than Damian Pierce or Ramondre Stevenson this week. Other weeks, maybe I'd say Singletary over Stevenson, but Stevenson has a great matchup against Detroit.
100%. So we have James Conner at 19, Breece Hall at 20. Do you think Breece Hall is a little bit too low this week?
Yeah, I was going to say that. You're talking about moving Singletary up. I'd move Breece Hall up over Ramondre Stevenson because we talked about his workload going up, and I like his talent a lot more than Devin Singletary, and I like his role in the Jets offense a lot more than Singletary's Singletary's role in Buffalo. I think that Breece Hall, we said he's on the upswing right now, and this might be one of the last buy low weeks. I think that this could be the week where he kind of cuts off that buy low window, and it's going to be, buy high if you're going to take him now.
Yeah, I'm with you. So where would you have him if you had to rank him?
I put him above Stevenson. I put him at.
Gotcha.
Let's see, that makes him what, 17? Yes. Yeah, that would make him 17.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. He has been, targeted a ton, and even with Zach Wilson coming back, he has been targeted. James Conner, a little bit of a tough matchup there, but yeah, I can see that. I think I have more confidence in those other guys. It is a little bit of a tough matchup against Miami, but Breece Hall, he has that ability to have some sort of a game-breaking week at some point. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to 21 through 30. Damien Harris, again, I have him here at number 21 because of the matchup. We talked about it. He could get some volume in this game, could punch one in into the end zone as well. Melvin Gordon, we talked about him at 22. A little bit conservative ranking here for him, but we want to see what that role looks like, going forward. Tonight, Rashad Penny at 23. Against New Orleans, this is a little bit of a tough matchup for him. The Seahawks also don't have a huge implied total. They did last week, but not this week against New Orleans. So I have him a little bit low.
One thing.
Go ahead.
He didn't practice yesterday, Rashad Penny. He did have something he said about his shoulder. He had some sort of shoulder issue that's flaring up. I don't know. I don't think it's going to affect him this week, but definitely something to monitor because, Kenneth Walker's waiting in the wings.
Yes, he is.
So, yeah, just something to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if you saw that report, but
I did. Keep an eye on his practice status on Thursday. Yeah. That will definitely be telling, for if we have to worry or not going into the weekend.
That was kind of a red alert for me because he's my fill-in running back for DeAndre Swift, and if I have both of them out, that's going to be an issue.
We got J.K. Dobbins at 24 against Cincinnati. A lot of points in this game. I think J.K. Dobbins, he's a low-end RB2 just because of the fact that my guess is that he'll likely continue to split carries. Doesn't have that 20-carry workload, just yet, if he ever does. So that's why I have him here. But, he's good to potentially punch in a touchdown and potentially give you 15 carries in this game. And this is a tough matchup against Cincinnati. They haven't really let up against running backs.
Right.
But at the same time, I do think that he could get it done. Now, going back to Rashad Penny real quick, I just want to say that New Orleans, even though it's a little bit of a tough matchup, they have they've given up 20 carries to one running back in each of the last 4 weeks. So even though it's a tough matchup, the Seahawks are also 5.5-point underdogs. But it's interesting that Rashad Penny might end up getting that workload regardless.
Right.
We got Jeff Wilson at 25, solid start. A little, Carolina's been solid against the ground, but he's been doing his thing. You might want to move him up actually. If you want to move him up, maybe right after Melvin Gordon. Would you start him over Rashad Penny this week?
Yeah,
he's been getting it done.
Yeah, given Rashad Penny's matchup, and like I said about his shoulder, I'm not going to put everything on Rashad Penny's shoulder being an issue. I think he's going to play, but Jeff Wilson, he's been good for pretty much the exact same production every week, which is solid low-end RB2 numbers. He's a good fill-in. He's not someone like if you're 0-4 or 1-3, I might throw Penny in because of his upside. But if you're chilling, one of your running backs went down. If you had Javonte Williams and you were a 3-1 team, Jeff Wilson can start. I think he has a nice floor. You can rely on him each week to have at least solid production.
We talked about Nahim Heinz already. We have him at 26 here. Miles Sanders at 27. He had a solid week last week. A.J. Dillon at 28. I think, they're going to end up running the ball a lot in this game. This might be a little bit low for A.J. Dillon, but to be honest with you, he's a little bit touchdown dependent, right? He has to get in the end zone for him to do his thing. Raheem Mostert, I have him at 29. That's a little bit above consensus as well. He's had pretty good usage last week. And against the Jets, I think that they might end up relying on the running backs a little bit more with Teddy Bridgewater in there. And, he's getting the routes as well. So he might end up getting targeted out of the backfield by Teddy Bridgewater. I have Naji Harris here at number 30, dude. Like, that's really, really low.
Yeah.
And he had no targets last week. He hasn't been getting anywhere close to the same amount of targets that he got last year in his rookie year. The offense isn't as good. We'll see what Kenny Pickett can bring. But we haven't seen Kenny Pickett target Naji yet, despite him having a whole half of football last week. And they're going up against Buffalo in Buffalo. Like, this just doesn't scream like anything good. Like, I just have more confidence and I think there's a lot more upside with all these running backs that I just mentioned.
Right. So This is where I'm starting to draw a line. This is like the Kyle Pitts of running backs right now. He hasn't really produced like we want him to, and obviously it's been solid. It's been relatively solid. Given the way running backs are, they haven't been. It hasn't been the high scoring position as it usually is so far this season. But he hasn't been getting it done. Whatever way you want to cut it. If you want to call 13 points as his ceiling so far this season, good. You can do what you want to do. But Naji Harris hasn't been getting it done. And, of course, I was big on him heading into the season. But the offense is, I think, worse than I even imagined it. So, yeah, I don't think there's a problem with having Naji at 30. I think
it's crazy, man.
It's very, very, very conservative. I think his ceiling is there because we know what Naji Harris can do. But until he gets any type of workload close to what he was getting last year, he's kind of going to be stuck in purgatory right now.
I think if he wasn't playing against Buffalo, I think I would have a little bit more confidence in him.
Well, yeah,
right?
He might be
just getting some sort of work
at that point.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah. Buffalo, he actually has 2 really difficult matchups coming up. Buffalo, and he follows that with Tampa Bay next week. So,
okay.
All right, that's not good. Rough 2-game stretch.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. If you can rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that would mean the world to us. And yeah, we appreciate you guys. We'll be back tomorrow with wide receiver and tight end rankings. We'll go over Thursday Night Football and any other sort of injury news that comes up between today and tomorrow. So we'll talk to you guys soon. Take it easy. For me and Zach, see ya.